The final 2019 episode of Airshow Dispatches takes us down under for the first time. This year, Edinburgh, just north of the city of Adelaide, hosted its first Royal Australian Air Force Airshow in 12 years. There was plenty of Air Force hardware on show, with scintillating solo displays from the Super Hornet, as well as the all-new F-35A Lightning II, and the Roulettes' first major airshow on the PC12. This is our pick of the action. Welcome to RAAF Base Edinburgh, home to the P-8 Poseidon and P-3 Orion aircraft of numbers 10 and 11 squadrons, and the host of this year's RAAF Airshow. Over 2 days, a 60,000-strong crowd came to witness a stellar lineup of modern and historic aircraft, and we'll start straight away with the A-18F Super Hornet. The sound of those two General Electric F414 GE400 turbofan engines producing a combined 44,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner, that's over 20% more than the A and B model Legacy Hornets, which the RAAF also operate, powering the Super Hornet to a top speed of Mach 1.8 and a service ceiling of over 50,000 feet. Australia, along with the US and Kuwait, are one of 3 nations to operate the Super Hornet, of which they have 24 examples in their inventory. And you can tell them apart from Australia's ageing fleet of A and B model Hornets from the Super Hornet's slightly larger size, particularly its enlarged wing roots. And here, a demonstration of the Hornet's famed high angle of attack capabilities in this spiral descent. Australia also operate 11 EA-18G Growlers, which are specialised versions of the FA-18F, which are used for electronic warfare. Now a pair of indigenous aircraft, 2 Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation Boomerang fighters, a little-known type which first flew in 1942 and served only with Australia. And now, even rarer, the world's only Lockheed Hudson takes to the air also, and very shortly the 2 Boomerangs will form up alongside it. The Hudson is based on the Model 14 Super Electra airliner, modified and used as a bombing aircraft, and with some 2,500 produced from 1938 to 1943, it's amazing to think that only one Hudson is still flying today. He is one of the biggest names in Australian aviation, the reigning Red Bull Air Race. world champion Matt Hall. He's flying his old MXSR race plane, which he flew in the air race from 2009 up until 2016. At that point, he replaced it with a newer Edge 540 version 3. Matt, along with Nigel Lamb and later Mika Brageau, flew one of only 2 MXS racers to take part in the Red Bull series. A fantastic torque roll here, the plane with no forward airspeed at this point, so the ailerons have no aerodynamic effect. Instead, Matt's actually using the torque of the engine to keep that aircraft rotating. The MXS is derived from the Giles 202, which later became the MX2, and then the MXS itself, of which only 12 have been made. Matt has further modified his quite extensively, not least by adding those large winglets you can see. Matt flew solo in a glider for the first time at the age of 15. He went on to fly F-15s and F-18s with both the American and Australian Air Forces before joining the Red Bull Air Race in 2009. He was 3rd overall in his first season, which was quite an incredible achievement, and then went on to be the runner-up in 2015, 2016 and 2018. He finally won during the shortened 2019 season, which was unfortunately the last time the series will be held. He's a very popular and personal pilot, Matt. I actually met him at Belmont Airfield in Newcastle a few years ago. Lovely little airstrip which he part owns and where he bases his aircraft. And at one point it even looked like the air race might be held there before the series unfortunately ended this year. And here Matt is demonstrating some of the techniques of the air race, flying at extreme low level around a course of imaginary pylons. Now an aircraft that will be a regular sight for people who live here near Adelaide, the P-8A Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft, which is of course based at this airfield. P-8, along with the E7 Wedgetail, which Australia also operate, are based on the Boeing 737 airliner, specifically the P-8 based on the 737-800, the E7 on the Dash 700 variant. An aircraft of similar role, but a very different era now, the P-2 Neptune. Australia being one of 11 nations to operate this type, and it did so between 1951 and 1977. 4 airworthy examples remain, 2 of which are operated by the Historical Aircraft Restoration Society, or HARS, in Illawarra. And HARS also operate the next classic aircraft we're going to see, the DHC-4 Caribou. Caribou was operated by the Royal Australian Air Force from 1964 until as recently as 2009. And watch out now for the Caribou demonstrating its impressive short field credentials. Australia's latest combat aircraft, the F-35A Lightning II, now commences its solo display. Australia has committed to 72 F-35s, with the first aircraft arriving last year. They're operated by No. 3 Squadron at Williamstown, with a total of at least 3 Lightning squadrons, possibly 4, planned for the future. Following a display by Lockheed Martin at the Paris Airshow 2017, Australia is actually the first military operator to perform an aerobatic display with the F-35, and that took place at the Australian International Airshow this year. The US Air Force followed suit with their own demonstration team, making its debut just 4 weeks later. And it's fair to say the aircraft has really caught the public imagination over the last year with its surprisingly dynamic performances. Pass now with the weapons bay doors open. A much older jet fighter now, the Cessna A-37 Dragonfly of the Temora Aviation Museum. This is an American light attack aircraft which first flew in 1964, never operated by Australia, although a total of 13 nations have operated the type, including 6 who still fly it today, those being Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Peru and Uruguay. The A-37 has also been active on the airshow circuit from 1994 until 2007, when it was the mount of the excellent Black Eagles aerobatic team from the Republic of Korea. The A-37 is based on the T-37 Tweet, another Cessna-built aircraft, built for the training role and introduced in 1954, and again still in service with several countries today. And that aircraft too has aerobatic team pedigree, being used by the national teams of Pakistan and Portugal. This particular aircraft is an ex-Vietnam People's Air Force jet, imported to Australia in 2001 and returned to flight last year. Going back a couple of decades further, and here is a showcase of 4 fighters of the Second World War period. CA-18 Mustang Eclat, an Australian licence-built version of the North American P-51, flying now with a Spitfire Mark 8. And now the Spitfire will join forces with this Hurricane Mark 12, Australia's only airworthy Hurricane, so I'll let you enjoy the sound of these two wonderful British fighters uninterrupted. From a 36 squadron in Amberley, a complete change of pace now in the form of the Boeing C17A Globemaster III, one of 8 C-17s operated by the RAAF. It's a highly modern transport aircraft introduced to the Air Force in 2006. With its 4 Pratt & Whitney F117 PW100 engines, it can reach a cruise speed of 450 knots, a range of some 8,000 kilometres. That's a full 50% faster and 210% farther than the C-130 Hercules, which Australia also operates. And finally, the RAAF's aerobatic team, the Roulettes. Originally flying the M326, the Roulettes operated the Pilatus PC12 from 1989 until March this year, whereupon they upgraded to the newer Pilatus PC12. This was their third public display with a PC21, but the first time they'd displayed it at a major airshow. The display routine is largely similar to before, but the speeds are higher, the sound is better as well. Listen to the scream of its 1,600 horsepower PT6A68B engine, and the aircraft are wearing an all-new paint scheme as well. In the days of the PC9, aircraft were actually switched in and out of the Roulettes to try and keep fatigue constant across the whole PC9 fleet, so the only special markings was a letter R applied to the tail when an aircraft was serving with the team. But now the Roulettes have a designated fleet of aircraft, and so they have a much more sophisticated paint scheme to go with them. Now a very challenging formation barrel roll. Pulling up now for their final vertical break, the Roulettes bring their display to a close. And not just their show, but also this series, 9 episodes covering 9 air shows all around the world. My thanks, by the way, to Nigel Woolley behind the camera. We'll be back for a new series early next year, starting with the Singapore Air Show, as This Is Flight returns to its spiritual home for the first time in several years. But for now, from RAAF Base Edinburgh, thank you very much for joining me. It's goodbye for now.